The wind scraped across the peat like razors. It was just after 2 a.m. when the British paratroopers began their advance, dark shapes moving low through the gorse and black mud. Somewhere ahead lay Goose Green, a small, wind-swept settlement of a few dozen civilians, and over 1,000 Argentine troops dug in with machine guns, mortars, and mines. The orders were simple: take the high ground, liberate the settlement. But war is never simple. It was May 28, 1982. The Falklands War had been raging for weeks. Two nations locked in a bitter, distant conflict over a patch of wind-beaten islands in the South Atlantic. Britain had sent a full naval task force. Argentina had seized the land. Now the first major ground assault was underway. The 2nd Battalion of the Parachute Regiment, 2 Para, had landed days earlier at San Carlos. Their objective, Goose Green, a narrow strip of land held by Argentine forces equipped with artillery, snipers, and full knowledge of the terrain. Intelligence was incomplete. Maps were out of date. Air support was limited. The paratroopers were outnumbered nearly 2 to 1. Lieutenant Colonel Herbert Jones, H. Jones to his men, was in command. They moved silently through the dark moor, sinking ankle-deep in marsh. Winds howled across the ridges, and the men carried over 100 pounds of gear each. Their boots sloshed, their radios crackled, their breath fogged in the cold. Then, before dawn, a sharp crack broke the stillness. A forward unit had walked into a hidden trench. Machine gun fire tore through the silence. Screams followed. Mortar shells exploded in the peat. The Argentines had been ready. What was meant to be a surprise attack turned into a crawl through hell. Visibility dropped. The terrain turned to mud. British units became separated, confused, pinned. Artillery from the settlement rained down on the advancing troops. Sniper fire stitched the ridgelines, and the ground itself, laced with tripwires and mines, slowed every movement to a crawl. Men were hit. Some bled out where they fell. Others couldn't be reached for hours. Communications failed. Air support was delayed. Still, the order remained: advance. Lieutenant Colonel Jones grew impatient. He paced. He shouted. He demanded action. His men were dying, and the lines weren't moving. Reports suggest he clashed with his junior officers, some urging caution, others confused by his orders. Then, without warning, he charged. Jones ran alone up a gully toward a fortified trench. Bullets whipped through the air. Grenade in hand, he pressed forward, determined to break the stalemate himself. He was shot in the back just yards from the trench and fell, mortally wounded. But something shifted. Inspired or shocked by their commander's sacrifice, the paratroopers surged forward. They cleared the trench, then the next, then another. Firefights erupted across the high ground. Hours passed. Dozens more fell. Finally, Argentine soldiers began to surrender. One white flag, then another. By mid-afternoon it was over. 17 British soldiers had been killed. Dozens more were wounded. Nearly 1,000 Argentine troops surrendered. One of the largest capitulations of the war. Goose Green was retaken. The cost was high. Lieutenant Colonel Jones was posthumously awarded the Victoria Cross. British newspapers hailed him as a hero. But among his men, the feelings were complicated. Some believed his charge saved lives. Others believed it was a reckless act of pride, that it left the unit leaderless during its darkest hour. But no one denied his courage, and no one forgot the sight of their commander, alone in the wind, charging into gunfire. The war would continue for another month. Port Stanley still lay ahead, more battles, more blood. But it was here, on this wind-scoured isthmus, that Britain proved it could win on the ground. Not with overwhelming force, but with grit, with sacrifice, and with the grim determination to finish what had begun. Thank you for listening to Last Post History. Subscribe for more true stories from the world at war.